I spent a week prepping for that dinner like it was my wedding all over again. The grocery list alone was color-coded: produce in green, meats in red, dairy in blue. The roast, a garlic and herb-encrusted masterpiece, had been dry-brined for 2 days. The wine had been chosen after 30 minutes of online review comparison and decanted at just the right hour to let it breathe. Our little dining table was set with care. Candles in the center, gold-rimmed plates, cloth napkins folded into gentle fans the way Isla once said reminded her of a hotel in Milan. I'd even replaced the flickering bulb in the hallway so no one would say the house looked dim. I made sure everything was perfect, because Isla's family notices when it's not. And tonight wasn't just dinner, it was their full approval, delivered through glances and passing compliments. Her parents, her cousins, and her sister Clarabelle. Her golden girl, her mirror, her best friend, were all coming. And I needed this to go smoothly. By the time the doorbell rang, everything was set. Milo, our 10-month-old, had just gone down for the night, his little stuffed giraffe tucked beside him. The baby monitor crackled faintly through the receiver I had placed just beneath the centerpiece. His soft breathing was like a metronome, steady and soothing. I took a deep breath as Isla opened the door and laughter spilled in before the guests even crossed the threshold. Her father's voice boomed through the hall. Her mother's perfume hit me like a floral wave, and Clarabelle's heels clicked like punctuation marks across the hardwood. They came bearing wine, stories, and expectations. The meal began with polite conversation, forks clinking, Isla's cousin Thomas talking about his engagement. I made the roast perfectly. Her mother actually said, "This is tender," like it hurt her to admit it. And for a moment, it felt like maybe, just maybe, I was part of something. That maybe I had finally earned my seat. Then it happened. Clarabelle, swirling her wine like she was the host of her own private show, tipped her glass toward Milo's empty high chair, smirked, and said, "Too bad your baby looks nothing like you." I paused mid-chew. Laughter broke out. Not the kind that bubbles up naturally, but the kind that slices sharp and cold. Her cousin stifled a grin. Her mother sipped her wine too quickly, and her father chuckled into his napkin like this was some long-expected confirmation. And Isla, my Isla, leaned in close to me, brushed her shoulder against mine like it was nothing, and whispered, "Maybe I have a secret." Then came more laughter, more smirking, more heat crawling up my neck, not from embarrassment, but from something deeper, something uglier. I looked at her face, at how comfortable she looked, like this wasn't her first time making me the punchline, like it was a game they'd all played before and I just walked into the room too late to stop it. I didn't flinch. I didn't frown. I smiled. And I stood up with the same slow, controlled grace I use when rocking Milo to sleep. "I guess we're all sharing secrets now," I said lightly and reached into my jacket pocket. The envelope was white, plain, unassuming. No wax seal, no theatrics. I had chosen it deliberately. I placed it gently on Isla's plate, right where her fork had rested a moment earlier. Her laughter faded like the tail of a dying echo. She glanced down at the envelope, then back at me. Clarabelle leaned in, her eyes narrowing, but I didn't look at her. I looked only at Isla. "Go ahead," I said. "Open it." She didn't move at first. No one did. Her mother blinked too much. Her father shifted in his seat. Clarabelle, for once, had no clever retort. The silence around the table tightened like a rope pulled from both ends. Isla's fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the envelope. She hesitated, slid her nail beneath the flap, pulled out the paper. She read it. The color in her face drained like wine spilled on white linen, soaking deeper with every second. I could see the exact moment the words reached her, the lines etched between her brows, the subtle twitch of her bottom lip, the way her fingers crumpled the edge of the page as if it might bite her. Clarabelle moved to peek over her shoulder, but Isla pulled the paper close. I stepped back from the table. My hands rested calmly behind my back. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't out for revenge. I wasn't yelling. I had nothing left to yell. "Since we're sharing secrets," I said again, "I thought I'd share mine too." No one laughed now. The room, once filled with clinking forks and smug glances, had become a tomb. Isla's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Clarabelle leaned back in her chair, no longer smirking. Her father set down his fork. Her mother's eyes flicked from me to Isla and back again, as though trying to read the script we were clearly improvising. I didn't know them more than that. But still, I looked at them all, each one of them who had. in their own way, chipped away at my worth for years. I had brought them into my home, fed them, smiled, played along. And in return, I was the joke they passed around like a bottle of wine. But not anymore, because the joke was over, and I wasn't laughing. From the moment I married Isla, I knew her family didn't see me as their equal. It wasn't overt at first, no name-calling, no slurs, no outbursts. Just little things. Things you could almost miss if you weren't looking for them. Darlene, her mother, would greet me with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She'd hug Isla tightly and give me a light pat on the shoulder, like I was the family pet who had learned a new trick. Wilmer, her father, only ever spoke to me about fixing things, the gutter, the fence, the dripping faucet in their guest bathroom. Never once about my work, my dreams, or even our marriage. To him, I was the guy who'd showed up in their daughter's life like a permanent inconvenience. But it was Clarabelle who made it clear. From day one. At our wedding, she gave a toast. Isla's beautiful, witty, golden sister. The crowd laughed when she said, I didn't know if Isla was marrying a man or a mystery. But I guess that's what you get when you order outside your usual type. More laughter. I smiled then. I drank to it. But inside, I felt something twist. It never stopped. Every family gathering, every birthday, every Sunday brunch, Clarabelle had something to say. Something that stung just enough to leave a mark, but not enough for Isla to call her out. You don't mind if we talk real estate, she once said when I joined a conversation about housing. It's just, you know, a family thing. Or, it's sweet how you always try to help with the dishes, so modern. And Isla would just roll her eyes, as if I was being too sensitive. That's just how Clarabelle is. But I let it go. I told myself these things didn't matter. I had Isla. I had Milo. I had a family now. I worked long hours, but I never missed a pediatric appointment. I handled night feedings when Isla was exhausted. I cooked. I cleaned. I held Isla when her cramps were bad, ran to the pharmacy when she needed something she wouldn't say out loud. I thought I was earning my place, not just as a husband, but as a son-in-law, a brother-in-law, someone they could trust, respect, maybe even love. But it never came. I remember one afternoon, just after Milo was born, when Darlene came over. Isla had gone upstairs to rest, and I offered her mother a cup of tea. She looked around the living room and said, You've done a lot with the place. It's very homey, not warm, not beautiful, not impressive, just homey. I tried to take it as a compliment. I really did. Then came the garden suggestion from Wilmer. You should build a shed, he said while inspecting my backyard like a foreman. Every man needs one. Right now it just looks like a patch of grass someone forgot to take seriously. I nodded, made a note, and bought supplies the next day. I built the shed in a weekend, hands blistered and back aching. He never said a word about it after. Still, I kept trying. Because Isla was worth it. Because our son was worth it. Because I believed, naively, perhaps, that love could soften the edges of any wall. But nothing prepared me for the moment my own wife turned our child into a punchline at my expense. It wasn't just the joke. It was the timing, the context, the way her voice softened into something playful and cruel at once. Maybe I have a secret. Like it was nothing. Like the weight of what she said wasn't heavy enough to crush a man in front of his own family. She said it with a smile, a tilt of her head. The same expression she wore when teasing me about my mismatched socks or the time I forgot to put gas in the car. But this wasn't that. This wasn't a silly oversight. This was the kind of line that carved its name into the room, like initials on a gravestone. When I stood and pulled out the envelope, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even nervous. I was clear. Clear in a way that only betrayal can make you. I'd carried that envelope for 4 days. It sat in my drawer, tucked under old birthday cards and receipts, next to a baby sock that had no pair. I'd stared at it every night, waiting for the right moment. And when Clarabelle made her joke, Isla followed, and I knew the moment had arrived. But as I watched the reactions around the table, the way Isla froze, the way Darlene blinked like she was short-circuiting, the way Wilmer looked everywhere except at me, I saw something else. A pattern. A system of quiet disrespect, of smiling cruelty, of unspoken superiority. It wasn't just Isla who laughed at me. It was all of them. It had always been all of them. I wasn't one of them. Not really. Maybe I never would be. But that night, I decided I didn't need to be. Because whatever came next, I wasn't going to keep chasing their acceptance. I wasn't going to keep shrinking myself so they could feel tall. I wasn't going to smile through another one of Clarabelle's jokes or nod along while Wilmer gave me another backyard critique. I wasn't going to accept being Isla's loyal sidekick while she played the lead in a story that made me the fool. No, that ended tonight. I didn't know what they'd say, what Isla would say, what the fallout would be. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back to pretending. And if that meant starting from scratch, alone, so be it. That joke at the dinner table wasn't random. It didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't just a poorly timed comment or a wine-fueled misstep. No, it was the punchline to a story I'd already begun to unravel quietly, methodically, painfully. The only difference now was that she said it out loud, gave voice to what I had suspected for months, maybe longer. It was her smirk. The cadence of her voice. The way she'd looked to her sister like they'd shared the joke long before the words were ever spoken in my house. Clarabelle had said the line, but Isla gave it weight, gave it confirmation. That whisper, "Maybe I have a secret," wasn't flippant. It was careless, cocky, a slip born of confidence in the lie. You see, for a while, I told myself it was in my head. I told myself marriage changes people, that sleep-deprived mothers drift and women under pressure retreat. But Isla didn't just retreat, she disappeared piece by piece. The woman I once lay beside, fingers tangled in mine like an anchor, began to flinch when I brushed against her walking past in the hallway. Her phone, which used to be a shared space, Spotify playlists, shared grocery lists, silly memes, suddenly became a vault. Locked. Screen flipped downward. Alerts turned off. If I reached for it absent-mindedly, she pulled it back like I'd just tried to steal her diary. And yet, every time I brought it up, she deflected. "You're being weird," she'd say. Or, "I just value a little privacy. Is that so bad?" Then there were the absences. Small at first. A late-night Target run that took over an hour. A yoga class that was suddenly off-site. A dental appointment she forgot to mention. Each one easily explained. Harmless on its own. But they added up. They formed a pattern that didn't sit right in my gut. I wasn't accusing. Not yet. I asked softly, "How was yoga?" She shrugged. Sweaty. I kissed her cheek and didn't mention the faint scent I noticed. Sandalwood and citrus, not sweat or essential oils. Something masculine. Something familiar. I thought I was being paranoid. I thought I was losing my grip. That's what you do when you love someone. You doubt yourself before you doubt them. I told myself Milo's features were just recessive, that his dark curls came from Isla's side, that his bright, almond-shaped eyes could be traced back to some second cousin or grandparent I'd never met. Genetics are strange, right? Unpredictable. That's what I told myself every time I held him close and wondered why I couldn't see myself in him. Why he didn't have my nose, my chin, my ears, any of it. Still, I loved him. God, I loved him. I was there when he took his first shaky steps between the couch and the coffee table. I was the one who paced the hallway at 3 a.m. when he had colic, whispering lullabies into the night. I was the one who warmed bottles, clipped tiny fingernails, memorized his birthmark like it was a sacred map. But love doesn't erase suspicion. It just makes the truth hurt more when it finally arrives. One night, after Isla had fallen asleep on the couch, I picked up her phone. Just picked it up. Didn't unlock it. Didn't go through her messages. Just held it in my hand. The screen lit up automatically. A preview of a message popped up from a number I didn't recognize. It read, "He's starting to ask questions. Be careful." My throat closed. My body tensed. I memorized the number. I didn't say a word. The next day, I started doing what I never thought I'd do. I started documenting. Quietly. Carefully. I made a list in my notes app titled, "If I'm wrong, I'll delete this." I wrote down the time she left and where she said she was going. I jotted down names she mentioned, places, inconsistencies. I saved receipts I found in her purse. A bill from a restaurant I'd never been to with her. A jewelry store charge. Isla hadn't worn new jewelry in months. Still, I didn't confront her. I wasn't ready for war. I wasn't even sure what battle I was fighting yet. But I knew something wasn't right. And when you can't trust someone's words, you follow their patterns. That's when I started thinking about the only piece I could verify. The paternity. I sat on the floor of Milo's nursery one night, the glow from his nightlight casting soft blue shadows across the room. He was asleep, breathing softly, chest rising and falling beneath a blanket with tiny stars. I stared at him, trying to convince myself he looked like me, that I was just tired. That people don't always look like their parents right away. But the questions clawed at me. I needed more than feelings. I needed facts. So I waited until Isla left for a girls' night. I walked into the bathroom, grabbed her toothbrush, slid it into a Ziploc bag, and labeled it with the date. I tiptoed into Milo's room, careful not to wake him, and gently pulled a few strands of hair from his baby brush. I took my own swab the next morning. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend. Some things you carry alone. I found a clinic an hour outside the city. No fuss, no judgment. Just clean forms, quiet halls, and polite professionals. The woman at the front desk asked me to write down my contact info. I did it with hands that didn't tremble. She looked at me and said, "Results in 12 business days." I nodded, drove home, kissed my wife like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Because the moment I dropped off those samples, I crossed a line I could never uncross. I stopped being the trusting husband. I stopped being the man who waited for answers to come willingly. I became something else, someone preparing for a truth I was afraid to hear but even more afraid to ignore. And now, looking back, I realized that dinner joke wasn't the start. It was the confirmation. What they didn't know was that I already had the wheels in motion. What they didn't know was that I wasn't blind anymore. And soon, none of them would be able to laugh without choking on the truth. I didn't want to believe it. That was the hardest part. Not the planning, not the collecting, not even the drive to Rivermount. The hardest part was admitting to myself that I needed to do it in the first place. Because loving someone makes you their defense attorney long after they've stopped being innocent. I kept trying to convince myself I was overreacting, that I was letting Clarabelle's snide jokes get to me, that postpartum changes, long nights, and drifting affection were all normal for new parents. That Isla still loved me, just differently now. That Milo, our Milo, was mine in all the ways that mattered. But every time I looked in the mirror, I saw a man rehearsing lies just to get through another day. I stood there that afternoon, alone in the upstairs bathroom, holding Milo's soft blue baby brush in one hand like it was a sacred object. His tiny strands of hair clung to the bristles, fragile and light. I stared at them longer than I should have. It felt wrong somehow. Invasive. Like I was stealing something from my own son. But I reminded myself, if there was nothing to worry about, this would simply be confirmation. Nothing more. I slipped the hair gently into the small Ziploc bag I'd labeled ahead of time, using the Sharpie I normally reserved for meal prep dates on frozen containers. It felt sterile. Too clean for something this messy. Next came Isla's toothbrush. It had lavender flecks in the handle and rested on the edge of the sink like always, barely wet from her last use. I grabbed it quickly before I could change my mind. Into the bag it went. Labeled, sealed, and then mine. That part felt different. Strange. Like I was submitting a piece of myself to a machine that didn't care what it meant. Just data. Numbers. A probability that could unravel my whole life. I took a buccal swab, careful to follow every instruction, folded it into the sterile envelope the kit had provided. Then I stood there, looking at the 3 small packages laid out on the bathroom counter. A brush, a toothbrush, a swab, proof of a life we built, and possibly a life we hadn't. The clinic was 58 minutes away, but I drove it like I was delivering a heart for transplant. Focused. Quiet. The road stretched long and smooth, late afternoon sun painting the sky with soft orange streaks. I didn't turn on music. I didn't call anyone. I let the silence work on me. Let it cut and stitch and scrape the raw thoughts I tried to suppress. When I pulled into Rivermount Genetics Clinic, it looked more like a dentist's office than a place where lives came undone. The parking lot was half full. No cameras. No fanfare. The sign was a simple etched plaque. Private testing. No questions. No judgment. That's what their website had promised. It's why I chose them. I wasn't ready for explanations. I just wanted answers. Inside, the air was too clean. Disinfectant and lemon, maybe. The receptionist didn't look up until I stepped to the desk. She had tired eyes and a calm voice. I told her I had samples. She handed me a clipboard and nodded toward a waiting room that smelled faintly of peppermint and plastic chairs. I didn't sit. I filled out the form standing, block letters, neat print. Full name, date of birth, contact preference. Then the key question, would you like your results delivered in person or digitally? I stared at that line for longer than any other. Face it here or face it alone. Digitally. I didn't trust myself to hear it while trying to hold composure in a public hallway. I needed the privacy to collapse or breathe or throw something if it came to that. I handed back the clipboard. The woman glanced at the entries and gave a tight, polite smile. You'll receive your results via email in 12 business days. If you need to update your delivery preference, just give us a call. I thanked her and turned to leave. I didn't look back at the counter or the quiet door that led to the testing rooms. I walked out as if I had just dropped off dry cleaning. But inside, my chest was a furnace, burning on low, steady heat, threatening to crack every rib one by one. The drive home felt longer, heavier. Like gravity had increased, like every streetlight knew my secret and blinked red just to make me sit with it a little longer. When I got home, Isla was on the couch with Milo, reading him a picture book about sea animals. She smiled when she saw me, kissed my cheek, handed me the baby. I took him, held him close, breathed him in. He smelled like baby lotion and vanilla cereal puffs. His fingers reached for my lip, curled around it like a hook. He giggled when I made a face, and in that moment, I hated myself for what I'd just done. For questioning, for needing proof. But the doubt had grown too loud to ignore. And once you start needing proof, love alone isn't enough to carry you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Isla, her breathing soft and even, her hand resting near mine, but not touching. I stared at the ceiling and wondered what truth would feel like. Would I feel relief? Or collapse? Would the results be a weight lifted? Or a wrecking ball? 12 days. That's what the receptionist said. 12 business days. I counted them out on my phone calendar, marking the expected day with a tiny red dot. I told myself not to check obsessively, but I knew I would. Because there's a point where you stop living inside your marriage and start observing it like an outsider. Watching for tells. Recording changes in tone and eye contact. Measuring silence like it's a signal. I was already there. I was no longer just Isla's husband. I was the man in the mirror, looking for signs of a stranger in the reflection beside him. I wanted to be wrong. I prayed I was wrong. But I was ready if I wasn't. Because when you hold a child in your arms and wonder who he belongs to, not metaphorically, but biologically, you're no longer living in assumptions. You're living in waiting. And waiting, I learned, is its own kind of hell. 12 days. And then I'd know. When the envelope arrived, it looked like nothing. Just a plain white rectangle with my name printed cleanly on the front. No fanfare. No bold warnings. No weight that could have hinted at the world it carried inside. I found it buried under a few coupons and a gas bill, just sitting there in the mailbox like it hadn't been rehearsed in my nightmares for nearly 2 weeks. I stood on the front steps for a long time with it in my hands. The breeze shifted slightly, tugging at the corner of the flap, like even the wind knew what I was about to read. Inside the house, I could hear Milo squealing, Isla laughing with him in that high, soft tone she used when she was being maternal for an audience, even if the audience was only herself. I didn't go inside. I walked around the back, down the side of the house, past the garden bed I'd built last summer with leftover bricks and Isla's Pinterest board for reference. I unlocked the shed. Not the garage, not the living room, not our bedroom. The shed. Because that space didn't lie to me. It held my tools, my sweat, my plans for projects that never needed approval. I slid inside, closed the door behind me, and sat on the stool I kept near the workbench. I stared at the envelope. Then I opened it. There were only 2 pages inside, but it only took 3 lines to obliterate me. Probability of paternity, 0%. Not 93%. Not 76.4%. Not even a tentative result pending retest. 0. The number wrapped around my spine and locked into place. I read the words again. And again. My eyes scanned for a loophole, a misprint, a technical error. Something. Anything. But there was nothing ambiguous about it. It didn't matter how many times I blinked. The paper wasn't going to rewrite itself. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't drop to my knees like I always imagined I might. I just sat there, completely still. My hands resting on my thighs. My breath shallow, but steady. It was the kind of stillness that happens when your body realizes no reaction will make sense of the moment. Grief hadn't hit me yet. Anger hadn't found its footing. What I felt was colder. Emptier. Like I had just been unplugged from a machine I didn't know was keeping me alive. I looked around the shed. At the walls I'd insulated myself. At the pegboard hooks where I hung tools in perfect rows. Everything was in order, and yet nothing was. Because somewhere upstairs, a little boy with bright eyes and a soft giggle was laughing. And I wasn't his father. Not in blood. Not in biology. I was just a stand-in, a shadow in a family photo. The husband who thought love was enough. The man who kissed his wife's belly and whispered dreams into skin stretched over someone else's child. And worst of all, someone knew. Isla knew. I don't know how I knew she knew, but I did. She'd carried that knowledge in the corners of her silence, in the flick of her eyes when I asked innocent questions, in the way she flinched when Clarabelle made her cruel joke. That wasn't surprise. That was a woman who had been waiting for the moment to catch up with her lie. I folded the letter carefully, not out of sentiment, but because tearing it would make it real in a way I wasn't ready to admit. I slid it back into the envelope and tucked it into the tool drawer beneath the wrenches and screws, the place where I kept things I didn't need but couldn't throw away. Then I sat there for another 10 minutes, listening to the muffled sound of birds and the occasional hum of a car passing on the street beyond our fence. I didn't go inside right away. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to look at her and wonder if she could still feel the weight of what she'd done, or if she'd buried it under 1,000 rationalizations, convinced herself that the timing had been confusing or the decision had been made with good intentions. I didn't want to hear her say, "But you love him," as if that absolved her from the lie that planted the seed of that love. When I finally did go inside, I was calm. Too calm. Isla was in the kitchen, making toast while Milo sat in his high chair, clapping at nothing in particular. She looked up at me and smiled. I forced myself to return it, even though it cracked something invisible in my chest. "How was the walk?" she asked. "Needed it," I said. I picked up Milo. He laughed like he always did when I made my exaggerated monster face. He reached for my nose. I kissed his forehead. And in that moment, I hated Isla more than I thought was possible for a man who once adored her. Because this little boy didn't ask for any of this. He didn't choose to be the weapon in someone else's betrayal. And yet he would carry its consequences. Whether I stayed or left, he'd grow up with that fracture under his feet. I didn't confront her that night. Or the next. I didn't sleep well. The bed felt colder, even with her lying beside me. Every time she shifted, I wanted to ask, "How could you?" But I didn't. Because once you open that door, there's no going back. And I wasn't ready for the war that would follow. So I stayed silent. I kissed her goodnight. I held Milo when he cried. But something had broken, and I wasn't sure anything could fix it. I kept the truth to myself for 2 months. 62 days, to be exact. Not because I was unsure of what I wanted to do, but because I knew too much to react on impulse. When betrayal cuts that deep, you don't scream, you study. You don't lash out, you wait. The worst kind of revenge is the one they never see coming. And I wanted her to see it. All of it. To feel what it meant to live inside the quiet before the strike. So I smiled. Every morning. Every night. I kissed her cheek. I packed lunch. I made sure to leave little notes in Milo's diaper bag. I took family selfies. I played my role so convincingly she started to relax again. She thought we were healing. But I wasn't healing. I was preparing. It was strange how easily I slipped into the performance. Like I'd been playing this part for years without knowing. I learned her rhythms again, not to fall in love, but to use them. I knew when she'd go to the store, how long she stayed in the shower, when she did late-night laundry and left her phone on the bed. I wasn't spying. I was documenting. Filing away every inconsistency, every soft denial that would soon fall apart under the weight of her own confession. She never brought up the joke again. Not once. Not a mention of that night. Not a single acknowledgement of the envelope I never told her I received. It was as if she'd rewritten the evening in her mind. Maybe she hoped I'd buried it. Maybe she assumed I believed the laughter was just nerves and wine. But I hadn't forgotten. I relived it every day, and every day I planned. The next dinner had to be perfect. Not just a meal, but a stage. I wanted every key player present. Her parents, Darlene and Wilmer, who always found new ways to remind me I wasn't quite what they envisioned. Her sister Clarabelle, whose tongue was a blade dulled only by her own ego. And cousin Thomas with his perfect hair and his fiancée, who couldn't stop posting about their endless vacations. They needed to be there. All of them. The ones who laughed. The ones who never defended me. The ones who sat at my table and treated me like a guest in my own life. I told Isla we should host again. "It's been too long," I said one morning as I made her coffee, just the way she liked, oat milk, 2 sugars, no eye contact. She lit up at the idea. "Yes, we should. Clarabelle's back in town next weekend." "Perfect." I said I'd handle everything. I wanted her to feel comfortable. caught off guard only when it mattered. The roast was the same one I'd made the night of the joke. Symbolic, maybe. Or maybe I just knew they liked it. I prepared it the same way, down to the rosemary tucked beneath the twine. The wine was Clarabelle's favorite, some pretentious French vintage she couldn't pronounce without sounding like a caricature. I even bought the dessert from that overpriced bakery her mother always raved about. Presentation mattered. I wanted the night to feel familiar, safe, because that's when people are most vulnerable, when they believe they've won. I set the table with precision. Cloth napkins, the gold-rimmed plates, candles. I played soft jazz in the background, the same playlist Isla used for date nights back when we still had those. Milo was upstairs, asleep by the time the guests arrived, his monitor turned low but clear. I checked it 3 times, more for comfort than concern. I'd bathed him myself, read him 3 stories, held him a little longer than usual. He wouldn't remember this night, but I would. They arrived right on schedule. Wilmer handed me a 6-pack like I still drank beer from bottles. Darlene kissed my cheek like it meant anything. Clarabelle walked in last, late and unbothered, draped in a designer coat she wouldn't stop mentioning. They moved around my home like they owned pieces of it. Isla laughed easily, touched my arm when she thought about it, as if that proved something. We sat. We ate. The table buzzed with conversation that felt like white noise. I smiled. I nodded. I served seconds. Clarabelle leaned in once and whispered something about how it's nice to see you still holding things together. I laughed. Oh, how I laughed. Then dessert came. Everyone had wine. The roast was nearly gone. The candles flickered low. That's when I reached into my jacket, pulled out a fresh white envelope, identical in look, but heavier in meaning. I set it on Isla's plate. Her eyes caught it immediately. She frowned. What's this? I looked at Clarabelle first, then at her parents, then back to Isla, since we're sharing smiles and secrets. I figured now's a good time. She froze. Clarabelle tilted her head like she was waiting for a punchline, but I wasn't laughing. No one was. Isla's fingers hovered over the envelope, then opened it slowly. She slid out the document and unfolded it. Her lips moved as she read. Her eyes widened. And then nothing. No denial. No protest. Just silence. Cold, sobering silence. Clarabelle leaned over, but Isla pulled the page close and said through her teeth, "Don't." Darlene asked what was wrong. Wilmer reached for his glasses. But I spoke before anyone else could fill the void. That paper proves Milo isn't my son. Not biologically. I got the test. Quietly. Months ago. And I've loved him every day since. But what hurts, what breaks me, is that none of you thought I deserved the truth. You all laughed at the joke. But the joke wasn't funny. The room was still. No movement. No breath. I looked at Isla. Really looked at her. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was caught. Like a child who'd broken something and hoped it would fix itself before anyone noticed. But it didn't fix itself. Because I noticed. And now, everyone else would too. Clarabelle made the joke again. Almost word for word. Maybe she thought it had aged into something charming, like a family anecdote meant to get a few chuckles over dessert. She was swirling wine in her glass, her voice lazy, tipsy with confidence. When she said it, Milo's adorable. Still doesn't look a thing like his daddy, though. She grinned, wide and smug, like she'd landed the punchline of a joke only she believed was harmless. The laughter that followed was a little softer than before. A little more tentative. Maybe even rehearsed. Isla sat beside her, fork in hand, eyes flicking toward me for just a split second. She smiled, but it didn't touch her eyes. I watched her lean in slightly toward her sister, like she wasn't sure whether to laugh or stop her. But she didn't stop her. She never stopped her. She never said, "Don't." Never said, "That's not funny." Never once looked Clarabelle in the face and told her to shut the hell up. Instead, she let it happen again. And this time, I stood. Not because I was angry, not visibly. Not because I was about to shout. No, the calmness was the point. The smile on my face was deliberate, razor-sharp, and practiced. I let the silence settle before I moved. The room dipped into an odd stillness. Darlene's eyes followed me like a hawk's. Wilmer sat upright, his glass of red paused halfway to his mouth. Clarabelle tilted her head with a performative smirk. Isla looked confused. And maybe afraid. Just a little. I walked around the table slowly. My hand dipped into the inside pocket of my jacket. The envelope made the faintest rustling sound as I pulled it out. White. Clean. untorn. I placed it gently on Isla's plate, right on the edge, next to the spoon she hadn't used yet. Her hand stilled over the table. Everyone watched. Since we're sharing secrets, I said quietly, open this. Clarabelle scoffed. What is this, amateur hour? Clarabelle, I said, turning to her with a soft laugh. You've had the stage long enough. Let someone else speak. She blinked, the sarcasm knocked out of her just long enough to shut her mouth. I turned back to Isla. Her hand reached for the envelope, but it wasn't graceful. It trembled slightly. She pulled the flap open, slid the paper out slowly, then began to read. One line, then another. I watched the color drain from her face in real time. Her back stiffened. Her jaw tightened. She didn't finish reading the page before folding it shut again. She didn't need to. She knew what it said. She'd always known. Clarabelle leaned in again, too curious for her own good. What's going on? Don't, Isla said, her voice low, sharp, and breaking. That single word snapped through the air like a whip. For the first time in all the years I'd known her, Isla's voice carried something close to fear. Not embarrassment, not guilt, fear. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw Clarabelle retreat. Her mouth closed, her wine glass lowered. Darlene leaned in toward Wilmer as if to ask a question, but I didn't give her the space to fill in the silence. Milo isn't my biological son, I said plainly, the words quiet but clear. The test was conclusive. 0% probability. But I still got up every night to feed him. I still kissed his forehead every morning. I changed every diaper. Sang him lullabies. I showed up for him every day. What hurts the most isn't that he's not mine by blood. It's that Isla knew. And she let me believe the lie. She let me become the joke at this table again and again. Darlene gasped, barely managing to cover her mouth. Wilmer set his wine glass down with too much force, the crystal clinking hard against the wood. Clarabelle just sat there, stunned into a silence I didn't know she was capable of. Isla didn't say anything. She didn't apologize. Didn't explain. Her fingers gripped the edge of the envelope like it was the only thing holding her to the room. I love that boy, I continued. I still do. That doesn't change. But the way this family has laughed at me, belittled me, excluded me, while you all either knew the truth or didn't care enough to wonder, now that changes everything. I turned slowly and let my eyes settle on each person around the table. To you, it was a harmless joke. A little wine, a little teasing. You saw a man who wasn't quite like you, who didn't come from money or long lineages or private school circles. And instead of embracing me, you entertained yourselves at my expense. You treated me like a placeholder, a warm body, a safe bet. But tonight, I want to make one thing clear. That stops here. The air felt thick, unbreathable. Darlene tried to speak, but her voice cracked before it could form words. Wilmer shifted in his seat like he wanted to stand, but had nowhere to go. Clarabelle. Clarabelle looked like she'd seen a ghost. Or maybe for the first time, she saw me clearly. Not as Isla's quiet husband, not as a safe target, but as the man who had chosen to stop being a victim in their private circus. Isla finally looked up at me. Her eyes weren't angry. They weren't pleading either. They were wet, unsure, like she had no script for this version of the story. No lines prepared. No clever pivot. I never meant, she began. I raised my hand gently. Don't finish that sentence. You meant all of it. The lies. The silence. The laughter. You chose it. Every day. And now we live with that. She opened her mouth again. Closed it. Her hands dropped into her lap. I stood there another moment. I didn't shout. I didn't storm out. I let the truth do what it was built to do, divide the room. Because the moment I laid that envelope down, the old version of me, the one who stayed silent, who waited for respect that never came, died. And the man standing there now? He would never beg to be included again. Isla tried to explain. I could see her gearing up for it even as she sat there in the stunned silence left behind by that envelope. Her eyes darted from one face to another, looking for sympathy, maybe even rescue. But no one reached for her. Not her mother. Not Clarabelle. And certainly not me. Still, she tried. She said it was a mistake. That the timing had been confusing. That she didn't know for sure. That she had hoped, prayed, believed Milo was mine. As if belief could will biology into existence. She said she didn't want to ruin us. That she had planned to tell me, but never found the right moment. That she had told herself love mattered more than blood. That I was already his father in every way that counted. Her voice cracked in just the right places, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress like a child caught stealing. It might have worked if I hadn't already lived in the silence of her betrayal. But I had. I'd lived there, slept beside it, raised a child through it. And still, none of those words answered the one question that burned through my chest. Why did you laugh at that joke? She didn't expect it. Her mouth opened, then closed. I watched her jaw clench, watched her try to spin the right version of the truth to give me. But she had nothing. Nothing honest, anyway. Because the answer was too ugly for the room. The truth was that she laughed because she thought I wouldn't do anything. She laughed because I had never stood up before. Because she thought I'd keep sitting at that table, keep smiling through the humiliation, keep being her safe bet. That night, after everyone had left, some in awkward silence, others with stammered goodbyes and averted eyes, I sat on the edge of our bed while Isla paced across the room. Her arms were crossed. Her words were cautious, no longer about damage control for the family, but about survival for herself. I made a mistake, she said again. No, I said, calmly. You made a choice. She turned sharply. You think this was easy for me? You think I planned this? I think you covered it up, I said, still not looking at her. And I think you would have let me raise that boy for the rest of my life without ever telling me if I hadn't found out myself. I didn't want to lose you, she whispered. Then you should have respected me, I said. You should have told me the truth before you let your sister weaponize it at our dinner table. You don't get to hide behind fear when you were laughing. Her shoulders sank. For once, there were no clever defenses. No righteous outrage. Just silence. That night, I slept in the guest room. Not because I needed distance. Because I needed space to breathe. Every room in that house felt tainted. The nursery. The kitchen. Even the hall closet held memories I no longer trusted. It's a strange thing to love someone and not believe a word they say. To cradle a child and wonder if every memory you built with them is rooted in a lie you were never meant to discover. Over the next week, the house became a museum of awkward stillness. We passed each other like tenants in a shared lease. We made small talk around Milo. Coordinated feeding times, doctor appointments, nap schedules. But beneath every conversation was a wound that hadn't scabbed over. She cried once, in the kitchen, over a bottle she dropped. Glass everywhere. She sank to the floor, sobbing into her knees. I watched from the hallway and didn't move. I wanted to. I wanted to hold her. But I didn't know who I was holding anymore. Clarabelle didn't reach out. Darlene sent one message. We hope you two can work through this. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a polished, distant attempt at decorum. They didn't ask about Milo. They didn't ask how I was doing. And honestly, I was relieved. Because a house without trust didn't need visitors who built the first cracks in its walls. One night, after Milo had fallen asleep in my arms and I'd finally laid him down, I stood in the doorway of his room for almost 20 minutes. Just watching. He looked so peaceful, so unaware of the storm we were drowning in. I envied him, his innocence, his freedom, but I also resented the unfairness of it all. That he had no idea who I was anymore. Not really. Not on paper. But my love for him, that didn't change. If anything, it solidified. Because what I felt wasn't transactional. It wasn't built on matching DNA or shared traits. It was built on the 3 a.m. feeds, on the lullabies, on the days I carried him against my chest just to feel his breath steady mine. Milo was mine in every way that mattered, except one. And I refused to let that one thing erase all the rest. But Isla, that was a different equation. I sat down with her the next morning. No anger, no performance, just clarity. She tried to start first, said she wanted to talk. I held up my hand. Let me finish first, I said. She nodded. I'm not leaving, I said. Not yet. But I don't trust you. And this marriage doesn't work without that. Her lip trembled. I'm not doing this to punish you, I said, voice steady. I'm doing it to protect myself. And him. She looked at me, truly looked at me. Like she was seeing me for the first time not as her husband, but as someone she'd underestimated. So what now? She asked. We rebuild, I said. But on new terms. My terms. And for once, she didn't argue. Isla packed a bag that night. Not me. I didn't raise my voice, didn't throw her out, didn't slam doors or toss accusations like broken glass. I just told her the truth. That I needed space, not just in rooms but in breath, in thought, in everything I hadn't been able to feel since the moment I opened that paternity envelope. And maybe for the first time since this entire spiral began, she didn't argue. She walked upstairs while I stayed on the couch, Milo asleep on my chest, his tiny fingers tangled in the fabric of my t-shirt like he needed reassurance I wasn't going anywhere. She didn't ask where she should go, and I didn't offer suggestions. The silence between us had matured into something almost functional. She moved with purpose, calm, quiet, not theatrical. A duffel bag, a backpack, a makeup pouch. She lingered at the bedroom door before leaving, looked over her shoulder once, and said, "I'll check in tomorrow." "Okay," I replied. That was it. No goodbyes. No promises. Just the sharp, short acknowledgement that something had fractured beyond repair, and we were no longer pretending it hadn't. The door clicked shut behind her, and for the first time in months, the house felt still. Not heavy, not tense, just still. I carried Milo to his crib, tucked him in gently, and stood for a while watching his chest rise and fall. It was strange. The proof on the paper said he wasn't mine, but everything in my body insisted otherwise. The way he nestled into me, the way his little lips twitched in his sleep, the way he sighed when I rubbed his back, all of it felt real. And in a world where so much had been false, I was holding on to that reality like a lifeline. The next morning, I didn't wake to Isla's usual humming in the kitchen or the sound of her shower running. It was just Milo and me. I fed him in the quiet, warmed his bottle while holding him in one arm, did that little bounce he liked to stop his whimpers. I let him fall asleep on my lap as I sat on the living room floor surrounded by wooden blocks and crumpled wipes. It was chaos, but it was mine. That week, I made 2 calls. One to a family law attorney, the other to a counselor. The attorney was practical, a woman named Amina who didn't blink when I told her the situation. She asked for documents, timelines, test results. She explained what legal father meant in our state, what rights I did and didn't have, and how we could establish shared custody despite the biology. "Do you want full custody?" she asked. I didn't even hesitate. "No," I said. "I want joint, but supervised. Until I can trust her again. And if she fights you, then she's choosing herself, not Milo." The second call was harder. Therapy always sounded good in theory, but I'd never gone before. The idea of sitting in a room with a stranger and airing out the dirtiest truth of my life didn't feel empowering. It felt like peeling skin. But I knew I needed it. Because the anger in me wasn't hot anymore. It was cold, settled deep in my bones like a winter I couldn't shake. And I didn't want that kind of cold to raise my son. The counselor, Jerome, was quiet, patient. He let me talk without interruption. I told him everything. Not just about Isla, but about the slow burn of being erased in a room full of people who laughed while I carried the weight. I told him how I hadn't slept properly in weeks. How I didn't know who I was if I wasn't Isla's husband or Milo's father. How some nights I sat in the hallway outside Milo's room because it felt like the only place in the house where I still belonged. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. And in that silence, I felt a piece of myself reassemble. A week later, Isla returned. She didn't knock. She had a key. She stepped inside like someone entering a church, quiet, remorseful, reverent. She didn't say, "I'm home." She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there in the doorway, her eyes scanning the living room like it was a place she used to know. I was sitting on the couch, Milo on my knee, bouncing softly. He reached toward her. She walked over, slowly, and kissed his head. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded, handed her the baby, and walked into the kitchen. I poured 2 glasses of water and waited. She joined me a moment later, barefoot, carrying the weight of every choice she made and every word she hadn't said until it was too late. "I understand if you don't want to fix this," she said. "I know I broke something I can't just patch back together." I didn't respond. "But I want to be better," she added. "Not just for us. For him." I finally looked at her. "Then here are my terms." She braced herself. "Joint custody. But for now, supervised when I say so. Until I believe Milo's safe and your head is clear." She nodded. "Second, public acknowledgement. You lied publicly. You laughed publicly. You will own that publicly. That means your family. Your friends. You clean it up." Her breath caught. "Okay. And third, we start therapy. Together. Separate. I don't care. But this only moves forward if you do the work. If I even feel like you're faking it, I'm done. No warnings." She blinked. "What about us? The marriage?" I finished my water and set the glass down gently. That depends on whether you show up now. Not just for me, but for yourself. And in that moment, I realized something else. She might have been the one who left that night, but I was the one who truly stepped in. Into fatherhood, into self-respect, into a life built not on pretending, but truth. And from here on out, I wasn't asking anyone for permission to be whole again. Months passed. Not quietly, not easily, but with a rhythm that slowly began to feel like a life again. A different life. Not the one I had built with illusion, but one built with clarity. At first, everything felt like rubble, shattered pieces of what I thought was a marriage, a family, a home. But sometimes, when a storm tears a house down, it exposes the foundation for what it really is. And mine? It wasn't as broken as I feared. Just buried beneath layers of compromise I should have never made. Isla kept her word. To my surprise, she followed every one of the terms I laid out. She didn't argue about supervised visits. She showed up to therapy, awkward at first, guarded, but she kept showing up. And when I told her it was time to tell the truth to the people who had laughed while I suffered, she did. She didn't do it in a grand announcement or a dramatic social media confession, but she told them. Clarabelle, her parents, her close friends. She let them sit in the discomfort of what they had once found amusing. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but I didn't need to be. Their absence since said enough. Clarabelle never came back after that dinner. No text, no apology, just silence. It suited me. Darlene and Wilmer sent a card for Milo's first birthday. No glitter, no balloons, just a white envelope with "Happy Birthday, Milo" in cursive and a gift card to a bookstore. The effort was minimal, but the tone had shifted. There was no more superiority in their posture. No more smug smiles at family events. They were quieter now, humbled, maybe even a little afraid of me. I didn't hate them for it. I just stopped giving them the parts of me that could be mocked. Milo started walking somewhere in the middle of all that. It happened on a Wednesday. I was in the kitchen, rinsing off his sippy cup, and he was in the living room wobbling between the couch and the coffee table. Isla gasped before I even turned around. When I looked, he was moving, arms out, eyes wide with determination, those chubby feet landing like thunderclaps on the rug. He looked straight at me, like I was the lighthouse pulling him forward. And when he reached me, he collapsed into my arms and laughed like he had just conquered the world. That moment broke something open in me. Not pain, not grief, but confirmation. Biology might be science, but parenthood, real parenthood, is 1,000 invisible acts of showing up. It's being the arms they fall into, the voice they calm to, the anchor when everything else is loud. I had never stopped being his father, and no piece of paper could change that. I built a new routine. Mornings were for Milo and me. Early breakfast, cartoons, a walk through the park if the weather allowed. I started taking photos of the mundane moments. Not the milestones, but the real stuff: milk spills, bedhead curls, half-eaten crackers and couch cushions. Life. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I just wanted to remember it. All of it. And Isla? She became quieter too. More introspective. She didn't reach for the old jokes or pretend things had gone back to how they were. She listened more. Said, "I'm sorry," without defense. She showed up for therapy with things written down, questions, reflections, sometimes confessions that made both of us wince. But the thing that mattered most? She stopped lying. About everything. Even the ugly parts. There was a moment, about 3 months into the new arrangement, when she asked if we could sit outside and just talk. Milo was down for a nap, the baby monitor balanced on the porch rail. She handed me a beer, which I didn't drink, but I appreciated the gesture. She was wearing one of my old sweatshirts, the one she used to steal during our early days of dating. "I know you'll never forget it," she said, staring at the horizon. "But, do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's not a prize you hand out because someone says they're sorry. It's a choice you make every single day to live without letting the past choke the present. And the truth was, I was still making that choice. "I'm learning to," I finally said. She nodded. "That's fair." We sat there in silence for a long time. And for once, it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt real. There's something strange about walking through betrayal and not letting it turn you bitter. Everyone expects the explosion, the scorched earth, the revenge. But I didn't want that. Not because I was noble, but because I had something more valuable than revenge: peace. The kind of peace that comes when you know who you are and what you're no longer willing to accept. I stopped shrinking myself to earn a seat at their table. I built a new one for me and Milo. For truth. For dignity. I went back to the shed one afternoon, the same one where I had opened the paternity results months ago. The envelope was still there, beneath the toolbox, creased at the corners. I pulled it out, read the first line again, and didn't flinch. I folded it, slid it into a box labeled Documents, and shoved it to the very back. Not to forget it, but to retire it. That piece of paper had once broken me. Now, it was just a record of a lie I survived. At some point, people began asking questions. Friends, coworkers, even my brother, who had noticed Isla's absence that week she left. I told them the version of the story I could live with. That something hard had happened. That we were working through it. I didn't make Isla the villain. I didn't make myself the hero. Because life rarely fits into clean titles. But I did make it clear, if you ever laughed at me then, don't expect a seat now. The house changed too. I painted Milo's room with a mural. Trees, stars, little constellations that spelled his name if you squinted just right. I replaced the old dining chairs. I bought new dishes. It sounds silly, but I needed to rebuild the home with my fingerprints. I needed to make it ours again, not the stage of a performance, but the shelter of our reality. Isla asked once if I ever thought about leaving. I told her yes. Often. Especially during those first few weeks when everything felt like a test I didn't study for. But I also told her the truth. Every time I looked at Milo, I saw a reason to stay. Not for her, not for an image, but for the bond one had earned every single day I showed up. I don't know if we'll stay married. Some days, it feels like we're finding our way back. Other days, it feels like we're just learning how to say goodbye without burning everything down. But whatever comes, I know this. I'm not the same man anymore. The man who once needed their approval is gone. The man who used to stay quiet when disrespected no longer sits in silence. The man who used to think love meant enduring everything has learned that love without truth isn't love, it's captivity. Now, I speak. I stand. I protect the peace I've built like a gate around a sacred garden. Because this story? It stopped being about betrayal a long time ago. It became something else. Something deeper. It became about becoming a father, not by blood, but by bond. It became about reclaiming my name.